Hello and welcome back to Drama Investigator. Saucy. Alas, Tati has finally responded to the lawsuit from her business partner Swanson, or to get more technical, her lawyer has responded. And Tati's fans have mixed feelings on her response. Some people are saying she did nothing wrong, others are saying she's still in the wrong, so today we're going to investigate some of Tati's side, and you can form your own opinion based on the evidence gathered. So the following legal documents were found on a lawyer's YouTube channel whose name is Emily D. Baker, so shout out to her for gathering the following receipts. Here was the email from Tati's lawyer to Clark Swanson's lawyer. Dear Mr. Smith, I have reviewed your letter on behalf of Clark Swanson dated August 3rd, 2020 regarding Halo Beauty Inc. It contains several allegations that are false and contradicted by documents, emails and other evidence. It also contains several defamatory statements about Tati and James Westbrook. Although I will not endeavour to address every misstatement in your letter, I write to correct the overall record and make clear that Mr. Swanson has no legal cause of action against Mr. and Mrs. Westbrook. On the contrary, the record is clear that Mr. Swanson exhibited a pattern of derelict and irresponsible behaviour which breached his fiduciary duties to Halo Beauty. Factual background: the Westbrooks collaborated with Mr. Swanson to develop a nutraceutical company. Your August 3rd, 2020 letter acknowledges that Halo Beauty, originally called Inside Out Beauty Labs, was created to develop nutraceuticals product that would provide beauty benefits to its takers. Mr. Swanson, Mr. Westbrook and Mrs. Westbrook, collectively the partners, had specific areas of expertise in which they were expected to contribute. Mrs. Swanson, who boasts of having spent years identifying and researching unique and exotic ingredients, was responsible for developing the nutritional supplement formulas. He also agreed to handle the company's finances. Mr. Westbrook, who had over 20 years of experience developing and manufacturing consumer packaged goods and taking them to the market in stores such as Walmart, Target, Home Depot and others, was expected to oversee Mr. Swanson's development process. And most importantly, Mrs. Westbrook, one of the top beauty influencers in the world, was responsible for packaging, branding and marketing the product directly to consumers through what Mr. Swanson acknowledged was a vibrant and very successful YouTube channel with millions of viewers, because it was anticipated that Mr. Swanson would provide half of the necessary capital to build the business and was expected to oversee the day-to-day operations. Mr. Swanson initially received 50% equity and the Westbrooks each received 25%. Mr. Swanson's repeated failures to perform his responsibilities, combined with Mr. Swanson's financial situation, led to a restructuring of the partnership. In December 2016, while negotiating the equity breakdown among the partners, Mr. Swanson represented that building a nutraceuticals company would require an all-in type of approach whereby it usurps his other activities, trumping them on the basis of perceived opportunity costs. Mr. Swanson, leveraging his purported wealth and past business success, insisted that he received 50% equity and promised he would be heads down on Halo Beauty, full-time with commitment of soul, sweat, brains and capital. Unfortunately, this proved to be one of the many false statements made by Mr. Swanson. For the first 7 months of 2017, Mr. Swanson was unreliable and unproductive. Despite his promise to develop Halo Beauty into a global nutraceuticals beauty brand, it became apparent that Mr. Swanson was unwilling or incapable of doing so. Mr. Swanson's approach to building a successful company was to cut corners, ignore deadlines, and avoid paying bills. Sloppy mistakes were common. After 7 months, he failed to complete any of the key milestones in the development of Halo Beauty's first product, the hair, skin and nail booster, even though Mrs. Westbrook had provided direction and target ingredients based on a competitive product and described in detail the type of jar she envisioned for the emerging realities, and the need to address and remediate the shortcomings of the prior 7 months. The partners unanimously agreed that the original ownership structure was no longer feasible. The partners needed to have an equal vote on all material business decisions, and the partners needed to have an equal amount of equity. It was further resolved that Mrs. Westbrook would be elected president and CEO, that Mr. Westbrook would be elected as COO, and that Mr. Swanson would serve as treasurer, CFO, and secretary. In consideration for restructuring the partners' equity shares, Mr. Swanson was relieved of his responsibility of running the day-to-day operations. Tasks such as locating manufacturing labs and negotiating supply arrangements were now to be handled by Mr. Westbrook. Going forward, Mr. Swanson was only responsible for developing the nutritional supplements formula and handling finances. Mr. Swanson was also partially relieved of his upcoming capital obligations. Mr. Swanson was short on cash and did not want to invest in custom tooling and packaging, which the Westbrooks insisted was necessary in order to put the company in a position to achieve its objectives. In exchange for renegotiating the equity, the parties agreed that each of the partners' obligations to the business would be $166,000. This revised equity requirement would have saved Mr. Swanson Swanson nearly $100,000 in cash. In Mr. Swanson's August 2nd, 2017 follow-up email, in which she purported to memorialise the new equity structure, this pro-rata capital obligation was the first change noted by Mr. Swanson immediately after noting the new equal equity breakdown. Mr. Swanson also secured an agreement from the Westbrooks that they would not sell their equity to any outside party for 3 years unless there was a unanimous agreement among the partners. The bylaws originally prohibited a sale of equity to an outside party for 2 years, but adding another year helped allay Mr. Swanson's concerns that Mrs. Westbrook and/or Mr. Westbrook might sell their equity in Halo Beauty to an outside party in the short term. Mr. Swanson understood that without the Westbrooks, he would not be able to sell any product, and his stake in Halo Beauty would be worthless. This was another reason why Mr. Swanson was willing to accept a reduction in equity. Just as he did with respect to his reduced capital obligations, Mr. Swanson was careful to memorialise this 3-year prohibition in writing. The partners never contemplated or discussed, much less agreed, that Halo Beauty would become Mrs. Westbrook's exclusive channel for all things beauty. Mr. Swanson's assertion that the restructuring of the partners' equity was in exchange for Halo Beauty becoming Ms. Westbrook's exclusive channel for all things beauty is categorically false. There is no email, document, or other single piece of evidence validating this baseless claim. Simply put, this did not happen. Mr. Swanson's claim also defies logic and common sense. At the time, Mrs. Westbrook was already a superstar in the beauty industry. She had multiple $1 million sponsorship contracts to promote various beauty products, and she was receiving $150,000 sponsorship fees for 5-minute YouTube promotions. There is no reason why Mrs. Westbrook would give a 33% equity stake of her entire empire in the beauty space, including products unrelated to nutraceuticals, such as fragrance and makeup, to someone with absolutely no role in the beauty industry, and whose contribution to Halo Beauty was limited to making nutritional supplement formulas. And the notion that Mrs. Westbrook would give 33% equity in her personal brand to Mr. Swanson, of all people, is particularly absurd because by that time she had no faith in his ability as a partner. The entire purpose of the August 1st meeting was to reduce Mr. Swanson's role because he was a personal and professional liability. Not only is Mr. Swanson's claim not credible, it is also undermined by contemporaneous written evidence. Mr. Swanson's notes memorialising the August 1st meeting did not mention anything about Halo Equity becoming Mrs. Westbrook's exclusive channel for all things beauty. It is inconceivable that Mr. Swanson, as the corporate secretary, would have included the adjustment of upcoming capital obligations and the additional 1-year prohibition against selling equity to an outside party as material consideration, but not mention his acquiring 33% of Mrs. Westbrook's profits related to all things beauty. Even if Mr. Swanson somehow had the subjective interpretation, as the corporate secretary, it was Mr. Swanson's responsibility to memorialise the parties' mutual understandings of the agreement and include all material facts. The notion that Halo Beauty was supposed to transform from a nutraceutical company into Mrs. Westbrook's exclusive channel for all things beauty is not memorialised in Mr. Swanson's notes or in any official corporate document. The August 15th, 2017 resolutions make clear that the Westbrooks can conduct business outside of Halo Beauty as long as it does not compete with nutraceuticals. On August 15th, 2017, Halo Beauty officially memorialised the partners' new equity arrangement and adopted certain resolutions by unanimous written consent. The resolutions do not give any indication that Halo Beauty was intended to be Mrs. Westbrook's exclusive channel for all things beauty. On the contrary, the resolutions identified 3 specific restrictions on the partners' outside business activities, which make clear that the Westbrooks could engage in outside business within the beauty industry with certain limited exceptions. The resolutions state, each of the members of the board of directors and the officers of the corporation may not engage in other business activities that 1. Materially interfere with the members and or officers' services to the corporation, 2. Compete with the nutraceuticals line of the corporation, and or 3. Any personal investment activities that directly compete with corporation. The first clause addressing business activities that materially interfere with services to the corporation is an attempt to ensure that each partner puts forth the appropriate amount of time and dedication to Halo Beauty. This includes performing basic professional obligations such as showing up to work, being responsive, and fulfilling one's job responsibilities at the expected level of competence and efficiency. It does not prohibit any partner from conducting other business as long as that other business does not materially interfere with his or her time and attention to Halo Beauty. The second clause prohibits partners from competing with Halo Beauty's nutraceutical line because it was the primary focus of Halo Beauty and the only existing product line at the time. Although the partners could have unanimously voted to create a new product line in the future, the resolutions only prohibited competing against Halo Beauty's nutraceuticals business by specifying that the partners could not compete against the nutraceutical line, but declining to specify any other product line line, the resolutions make clear that the parties could compete in other business lines outside of nutraceuticals. In fact, the resolutions specifically carve out protections to make clear that both Mr. Swanson and the Westbrooks could continue to operate certain businesses outside of Halo Beauty. Mr. Swanson was permitted to continue to own his interest in Renewzen LLC, so long as its products did not compete with the products manufactured and sold by Halo Beauty. In addition, the Westbrooks were permitted to continue to engage their services to each of Tati Inc. and Takes 18 Productions LLC in connection with 1. The development, production, distribution, content on YouTube, and on or in any and all other platforms now known or hereafter devised, and 2. The exploitation of any and all rights in connection therewith. By carving out Tati Inc. from Halo Beauty, the resolution makes clear that the Westbrooks could continue to develop, produce, and distribute beauty-related content on YouTube and other social media platforms. The language is particularly broad in protecting the Westbrooks media and branding rights, and the resolution also protects the Westbrooks' exploitation of any or rights in connection therewith. This not only authorises the Westbrooks to continue to develop, produce, and distribute content on YouTube and other social media platforms, but also authorises the Westbrooks to pursue anything connected to the expansion of their brand, fame, and social media influence. This broad and wide-ranging carve out of Tati Inc. from Halo Beauty is patently inconsistent with Mr. Swanson's baseless claim that Halo Beauty was intended to become Mrs. Westbrook's exclusive channel to all things beauty. The partners' actions following the August 1st meeting make clear that Halo Beauty remained a nutraceutical company. Mr. Swanson's August 2nd, 2017 email described a plan to launch a food supplement line of business, comprised of 5 different products. He did not mention any other beauty product lines such as fragrant or colour cosmetics. In addition, Halo Beauty's trademark filed on August 23rd, 2017 describes its goods and services as dietary and nutritional supplements in the nature of vitamin capsules, containing primarily vitamins, minerals, plant extracts, and or botanicals for promoting healthy hair, skin, and nails. There is no evidence to support Mr. Swanson's claim that the Westbrooks agreed to expand Halo Beauty to include fragrance, colour cosmetics, or any other beauty line outside vitamins, supplements, and skincare. Mr. Swanson's attempt to expand the scope of Halo Beauty by claiming it as an all-inclusive brand is misplaced and disingenuous. In claiming that the Westbrooks wanted Halo Beauty to be an all-inclusive brand, your letter specifically cites Mrs. Westbrook's February 28, 2018 YouTube video entitled My Brand Announcement, in which she describes Halo as an all-inclusive brand, but it is obvious that Mrs. Westbrook's reference to being an all-inclusive brand is reference to her customers, not her product. Mrs. Westbrook explains in her February 28, 2018 YouTube video, the name of my brand is ... Halo Beauty. To me it means that everyone is included, everyone is under the halo, everyone is thought of and no one is left out. So there is something for everyone. It's an all-inclusive brand, and I knew that would be so important, so Halo Beauty is for all of us. No reasonable person would understand this quote to mean that Mrs. Westbrook has agreed to fold all future business opportunities into Halo Beauty. Instead, Mrs. Westbrook was proudly declaring that Halo Beauty, which she made clear was not a fragrance or makeup company but a nutraceutical company, cared about the importance of inclusivity, i.e. diversity, within the beauty community and making sure that products were being made for everyone regardless of race, sex, or sexual orientation. Mrs. Westbrook's YouTube announcement revealing Halo Beauty makes clear that Halo Beauty is a nutraceutical company. When Mrs. Westbrook announced the launch of Halo Beauty in her February 28, 2018 YouTube video, she explained, "A lot of you are expecting skincare or makeup. It's neither." Mrs. Westbrook went on to make clear that Halo Beauty was a nutraceutical company for beauty products. She said that she was working with a team of very bright, brilliant people that know their stuff when it comes to nutraceuticals. She touted Halo Beauty's first product, a hair, skin, and nails booster, as the perfect vitamin. Distinguishing her nutraceutical product from more generic beauty products, Mrs. Westbrook explained that the nutraceuticals are a more potent, better way to deal with some of your issues with dry skin and appearance issues than a moisturizer or makeup. Those are kind of just icing on the cake. Mr. Swanson's alleged attempts to expand Halo are self-serving, inaccurate, and irrelevant. Mr. Swanson alleges that he applied himself to expanding the Halo Beauty brand to other product lines, but the Westbrooks never showed any interest. However, far from establishing that the Westbrooks violated some imagined agreement that Halo Beauty was supposed to be an all-inclusive beauty brand, these examples only confirm that the Westbrooks intended Halo Beauty to be a nutraceuticals company. The fact that Mr. Swanson admits the Westbrooks never showed any interest in Mr. Swanson's purported attempts to expand Halo Beauty only confirms that the Westbrooks never deceived Mr. Swanson, but rather were consistently clear that they did not want to do business with him beyond nutraceuticals, which was the only beauty product where Mr. Swanson offered any value. Moreover, the Westbrooks were under no obligation to abide by Mr. Swanson's Swanson's ideas for Halo Beauty. Section 7.4 of the resolutions specifically required a unanimous consensus among all partners regarding all major or material business decisions. Therefore, Mr. Swanson had no unilateral right to expand Halo Beauty's product line without the consent of the Westbrooks. Finally, while it is true that the Westbrooks had to constantly remind Mr. Swanson to keep his eye on the scope of his work, this was due to the fact that Mr. Swanson had a pattern of failing to develop nutritional supplement formulas in a timely fashion, while simultaneously suggesting a new product idea or far-fetched agenda in an apparent attempt to divert attention away from his own failures. The Westbrooks sought to minimise, not expand, their business dealings with Mr. Swanson because he was a constant liability personally and professionally. After being warned in February 2017 by Mr. Swanson's own brother that Mr. Swanson had a history of skipping important financial steps and engaging in manipulative and deceitful behaviour, the Westbrooks soon started witnessing firsthand that Mr. Swanson was unreliable and dishonest. For example, Mr. Swanson habitually failed to pay the customer support personnel on time. Rather than accept responsibility or apologise for his mistakes, Mr. Swanson would concoct convoluted stories that did not make sense. On one occasion, Mr. Swanson told a customer support staff member that her paycheck had been sent to the wrong address and that he would re-FedEx the check overnight. The staff member was confused and disturbed when, after talking to her colleagues, it became clear that Mr. Swanson had told each of them individually the same implausible story regarding their paychecks being inadvertently sent to the wrong address. Mr. Swanson also routinely failed to pay vendors on time. Mr. Westbrook would externally apologise on behalf of his accounting department, while internally Mr. Swanson would make bizarre excuses that did not make sense. Mr. Swanson was not only unreliable, but his inappropriate behaviour also threatened Halo Beauty's business relationships. On one occasion, Mr. Swanson embarrassed the Westbrooks by agitating Jeffree Star, a friend and colleague of Mrs. Westbrook and a highly successful entrepreneur in the beauty industry. Following a gathering at the Westbrooks' home, Mr. Swanson followed Jeffree Star to his car and attempted to sit in Star's custom-ordered Lamborghini. Star recoiled and expressed his displeasure with Mr. Swanson's lack of social awareness by telling him to schedule a test drive. On another occasion, despite being warned about respecting Star's boundaries, Mr. Swanson posted a picture of Star's Lamborghini on his Instagram account. Deeply disturbed by Mr. Swanson's behaviour, Mr. Westbrook instructed Mr. Swanson to remove the social media post immediately. Most problematically, however, Mr. Swanson behaved inappropriately towards women. In meetings with potential business partners, Mr. Swanson would address men and women in different tones. While he was generally respectful to men, Mr. Swanson would aggressively explain things to women in a condescending manner. Mr. Swanson's behaviour was bad for the Halo Beauty brand and embarrassing for the Westbrooks personally. Women who worked with Halo Beauty also felt uncomfortable around Mr. Swanson. Mr. Swanson acted inappropriately towards the Westbrooks female staff and was often handsy. He would squeeze the Westbrooks assistant's shoulders or Mrs. Westbrook's knees and elbows and give unwanted hugs. The Westbrooks repeatedly requested that Mr. Swanson to keep his hands to himself and respect the physical privacy of others. The Westbrooks routinely pleaded with Mr. Swanson to focus on the formulas and finances and allow Mrs. Westbrook to manage the social media relationships, marketing, and corporate vision. The Westbrooks were therefore shocked and appalled when they discovered that Mr. Swanson had invited Michelle Phan, a successful and famous YouTube influencer, to a business lunch 1 week after meeting her at a Halo Beauty event to which Mrs. Westbrook had invited her. Mr. Swanson knew that the Westbrooks had a pre-existing relationship with Ms. Phan, but he never mentioned this lunch to the Westbrooks. Instead, the Westbrooks learned about Mr. Swanson's lunch invitation through Ms. Phan, who sent a direct message to Mrs. Westbrook. The incident further confirmed for the Westbrooks that Mr. Swanson was a loose cannon who could not be trusted to represent the Halo Beauty brand or Mrs. Westbrook's name in a positive light. The Westbrooks demanded that Mr. Swanson stand down, not as a means of somehow stealing a corporate opportunity, but rather in order to protect the Halo Beauty brand from potential embarrassment and disaster. Mr. Swanson knew about the launch of Tati Beauty in advance, and he did not object. In late October 2019, Mrs. Westbrook launched a colour cosmetics, i.e. makeup brand called Tati Beauty. 6 months earlier, in April 2019, Mr. Westbrook told Mr. Swanson about this plan. Mr. Swanson acknowledges this in your August 3rd letter. Mr. Westbrook personally approached Mr. Swanson about the launch because he knew Mr. Swanson, a highly anxious individual, would be concerned that the makeup brand might adversely affect Halo Beauty. Mr. Westbrook assured Mr. Swanson that the launch was based on Mrs. Westbrook's years of personal experience and research in the makeup industry, and the additional time requirement would not interfere with her commitments to Halo Beauty. Mr. Swanson never raised the view in this discussion or any other that Halo Beauty was Mrs. Westbrook's exclusive channel for all things beauty, or that she was legally prohibited from launching her own makeup line. In fact, Mr. Swanson was encouraged when Mr. Westbrook pointed out that the launch of Tati Beauty would provide good publicity for Mrs. Westbrook's YouTube channel, and would not only serve as a catalyst to lift Halo Beauty sales, but would also make it much easier to market future Halo Beauty products through PR to other social media influencers. Once his concerns over Mrs. Westbrook's time commitment were allayed, Mr. Swanson expressed his support for Tati Beauty. He even asked if he could attend Tati Beauty's launch party, and the Westbrooks graciously welcomed him. At the party, Mr. Swanson was completely supportive. Mr. Swanson repeatedly congratulated Mrs. Westbrook and told her that he was extremely proud of her. He requested to take a photo with the Westbrooks in the Tati Beauty branded photo booth. After the party, he even requested sample PR kits with the makeup palettes for his girlfriend and daughter. He filmed his daughter using the Tati Beauty makeup palette and uploaded the video to YouTube. Now, page 12 of the lawsuit basically states that Tati didn't do anything wrong and that she didn't breach a duty of loyalty owed to Halo Beauty. In his December 16th, 2018 text message, Mr. Swanson makes clear that when he refers to cosmetics, he is referring to skincare, not makeup. In the text message, Mr. Swanson first suggests visiting Cosmetic Enterprises, a manufacturer and packager of cosmetics and pharmaceuticals. This alone is evidence that Mr. Swanson meant skincare, not makeup, because Cosmetic Enterprises' website includes skincare products among its product capabilities, but does not mention makeup. When Mr. Westbrook responded by once again instructing Mr. Swanson to stay out the way of the business relationships and let Mrs. Westbrook, Halo Beauty CEO, take the lead, Mr. Swanson responds, "No worries, I'm very excited about our company, and I have no doubt Tati will crush it on the lineup for skincare." This makes it clear that the partners were not discussing a makeup line, but rather a skincare line. The latter portion of Mr. Swanson's response also makes clear that the decision to pursue the skincare line under Halo Beauty was not a legal obligation, but rather a personal decision for the Westbrooks to make. Mr. Swanson concluded the text message by writing, "And moreover, keeping the cosmetics under Halo Beauty and including me is a sign of amazing collaboration and kinship. My gratitude is to be your best friend." Celebratory hand emoji. These are not words of a man who sold equity in Halo Beauty in order to acquire Mrs. Westbrook's exclusive channel to all things beauty. These are words from a partner who knew he was dead weight and was grateful that his close friends were making him money. Mr. Swanson's sole reference to makeup was in response to an email he received from Halo Beauty's ceramides distributor that was sent to Mr. Westbrook in response to a question about a version of ceramides that could be used in makeup manufacturing. At this time, the Westbrooks were negotiating a makeup eyeshadow collection with a third party, and they were considering using ceramides in the eyeshadow palette. This was a completely separate business opportunity from Mrs. Westbrook. Mr. Swanson understood this, and he did not object. Mr. Swanson's sudden about-face years later can only be attributed to greed. Launching Tati Beauty did not breach a duty of care owed to Halo Beauty. The launch of Tati Beauty has not negatively impacted Halo Beauty. In fact, the evidence suggests that positive publicity and increased celebrity status of Mrs. Westbrook from Tati Beauty's launch in October 2019 benefited Halo Beauty. Even though Halo Beauty had not launched any new product lines in 2019 due to Mr. Swanson's failure to provide the formulas, Halo Beauty's monthly sales were up substantially in November 2019, December 2019, and February 2020 compared to the prior year, and January 2020 would have been up but for an enormous free shipping promotion that occurred in January 2019. In March 2020, everything came to a screeching halt due to COVID-19. But in light of Mr. Swanson's failure to provide new formulas, it is clear that Tati Beauty was the catalyst for boosting Halo Beauty sales. Mr. Swanson's complaints about Halo Beauty's marketing and the numbers of times Mrs. Westbrook posts on her Instagram account reveal Mr. Swanson's utter incompetence and lack of understanding when it comes to marketing beauty products through social media. First, Mr. Swanson's claim that marketing for Halo Beauty has almost disappeared is false and makes no sense. Halo Beauty has never spent any money for paid advertising and instead has relied on natural organic traffic through word of mouth and social media marketing. Second, Mr. Swanson argues that because Mrs. Westbrook allegedly made more Instagram posts and made more video mentions on YouTube, whatever that means, mentioning Tati Beauty than Halo Beauty, Tati Beauty has done massive damage to Halo Beauty. As a threshold matter, there has never been any required number of social media posts or deliverables, and the frequency of Mrs. Westbrook's social media posts is entirely within her discretion. In addition, Mr. Swanson fails to appreciate the difference between marketing a makeup product, which allows for a wide variety of visual demonstrations, demonstrations, and a nutritional supplement, which is limited to showing before and after effects. Finally, Mr. Swanson fails to mention Mrs. Westbrook's stories on Instagram and Snapchat, which are not static photos but disappear after a day, or the hundreds of YouTube videos where Mrs. Westbrook prominently features Halo Beauty products behind her on her vanity, and included the link to Halo Beauty's website at the top of YouTube's description box. Mr. Swanson's claims that Tati Beauty somehow damaged Halo Beauty do not withstand minimal scrutiny. Launching Tati fragrance would not breach any fiduciary duties to Halo Beauty. The Westbrooks have not signed or committed to launching a fragrance licensing deal, but just as the Westbrooks had no legal obligation to launch a makeup line under Halo Beauty, they also have no legal obligation to launch a fragrance line under Halo Beauty. Mr. Swanson has not attached any evidence that the partners ever contemplated pursuing a fragrance line under Halo Beauty. Mr. Swanson merely cites, but does not attach, a March 31st, 2020 email in which Swanson, in a self-serving attempt to create a false record, claims that Tati fragrance was contemplated at the time of Halo Beauty's initial formation. So basically, in page 15 of this lawsuit, it just states that Mr. Swanson breached his duties towards Halo Beauty and invested more time into other projects where he invested way more money and way more of his time, and it was also a family business. On page 16, it also states that he didn't prepare financial statements and that he failed to make tax payments. Finally, in conclusion, the lawsuit states, resolution. The Westbrooks categorically reject Mr. Swanson's demand for any interest in Tati Beauty, and Mr. Swanson's demand that the Westbrooks transfer all of their shares in Halo Beauty to Mr. Swanson. If Mr. Swanson wishes to litigate this matter, the Westbrooks will vigorously defend themselves and bring counterclaims against Mr. Swanson. The Westbrooks are confident that they would prevail because the truth is on their side. So then at the end of the lawsuit, there's all these examples that Tati's lawyer was referring to throughout his statement. The first one here is an email showing what one of the partners' meetings was covering, and yet again we can see Tati's plans in 2018 for suing another drama channel, Karina Kaboom. Saucy. Would love to know what happened there. Here Clark and James are talking about a certain ingredient with CBD oil in it or something, and just look at the way James describes Tati like she's some kind of saint. With CBDs, yeah, ... She's not Jeffree Star, bro. She's Snow White, and held to a higher moral standard. Now, throwback to Clark Swanson's lawsuit, he said that James was sending him profanity, but here we can see it was actually Clark sending James profanity as well. Now, I won't go through all the countless receipts on the trademark filings and emails about them launching Halo Beauty, but I will expose the most juiciest receipts of them all. Screenshots of text messages where James is calling out Clark for not keeping low-key on his Instagram with regards to Tati's personal life. Bro, you have to set ego aside and take down your Instagram. If your Facebook is still active, take it down too. You're exposing our playbook and putting Dr. Joe at risk. And here we can see a photo of Jeffree Star's car. James had said, photos of our house in Seattle, our house in LA with your car parked in front of Jeffree's car. Geez bro, why can't you lay low? All of your social and friends too has to come down or I'm not talking to you anymore. Serious man, not cool. Then most importantly, here we can see receipts that show Clark and James arguing about releasing products that aren't ready. Clark had said, good morning bro him. I was thinking about our products and if we can't do setting spray this year, we should launch Sakura early. I don't think the seasonality of it matters frankly, but rather when they bloom, we can do a push on what is already launched. It's ready. Immunity next week now. Early Sakura? You mean the Sakura that we don't have a finished formula, label quote, silk screen or bottle? The formula that FLP hasn't sourced any ingredients or scheduled production time to mix and fill? And let's not forget about photography and marketing. Juicy. So what are your thoughts on all this drama? Whose side are you on? Tati's or Clark Swanson's? Let me know in the comments.